They didn't crawl out from under your bed. They didn't wear masks or lurk in haunted woods. No, the real monsters stood behind pulpits, wore lab coats, smiled across fences, and kissed their children goodnight. They healed the sick, prayed with the faithful, shook your hand, and offered help. But beneath the surface, they carried something far more sinister than any horror story ever told. They were calm, calculated, and quietly capable of slaughtering dozens, sometimes hundreds, without remorse. This isn't a tale meant to entertain. It's a warning cloaked in reality. These are the 10 serial killers who didn't just take lives. They rewrote what evil looks like. What makes a killer terrifying isn't just the number of lives they take. It's the way they do it, the pleasure they derive, the deception they maintain, and the terrifying patterns they repeat. Let me walk you through the deadliest, most disturbing minds we've ever known, and explain why, in my view, they sit at the pinnacle of evil. Evil doesn't wear horns or a black cloak. Sometimes, it wears a stethoscope. Sometimes, it smiles from the pulpit or flashes a charming grin at a college campus. Across the globe, behind locked doors, on lonely roads, and in crowded cities, 10 figures emerged from the shadows, each one reshaping the limits of cruelty and leaving behind a legacy soaked in blood. This is not fiction. These are real men and women whose names are etched into history, not for the lives they lived, but for the lives they took. It began in the quiet lanes of England, where a trusted physician, Dr. Harold Shipman, walked into the homes of elderly women not to heal, but to kill. Known as the Doctor of Death, Shipman is believed to have murdered between 218 and 250 of his patients, administering lethal doses of morphine with the precision of someone trained to preserve life. He signed their death certificates himself, coldly burying the truth under a mountain of forged paperwork. Shipman didn't need to hide in alleys or prowl at night. He killed in daylight, behind the mask of respectability, leaving a nation stunned and betrayed. Half a world away, in the war-torn streets of Colombia, a different kind of predator prowled. Luis Garavito, a man who once posed as a schoolteacher, social worker, and even a priest, became known simply as the Beast. He preyed on the poorest and most vulnerable, street boys, orphans, and child laborers, luring them with candy, money, or promises of safety. But what followed was horror, rape, torture, and murder. Garavito confessed to killing 138 boys, though investigators believe the true number may exceed 300. His crimes were unspeakable, and yet his ability to blend in kept him free for years. He hunted innocence and erased it. Then came Pedro López, the monster of the Andes. Operating in Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, López's trail of destruction may be the darkest of them all. He claimed to have killed more than 300 young girls. He was caught. He confessed. And then, shockingly, he was released from prison. Authorities lost track of him, and to this day, no one knows where he is. His story is a brutal reminder that justice doesn't always prevail. Sometimes, evil escapes into the mist. Across the United States, another killer was moving silently between states. His name was Samuel Little, and for decades, no one knew his name. He strangled women, mostly black, addicted, homeless, or ignored by society. He didn't leave much evidence. He didn't need to. The system didn't care enough to connect the dots. By the time he was caught, he had confessed to 93 murders. He remembered their faces, sometimes better than the police ever did. The FBI confirmed over 60 of those kills. His reign of terror lasted more than 40 years. Gary Ridgway, the infamous Green River Killer, left bodies in woods, creeks, and ravines across Washington state. His victims were mostly sex workers and runaways, women he deemed unworthy of life. With a cold and deliberate method, he lured them into his truck, strangled them, and disposed of their bodies like waste. Ridgway admitted to 71 murders, though he was convicted of 49. All the while, he lived a seemingly ordinary life. Husband, father, worker. His mask never slipped until it was too late. If Ridgway was methodical, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, was theatrical. He stalked his victims with military precision. He broke into their homes, bound them with ropes, tortured them mentally and physically, and then killed. Rader reveled in the fear he created. He even named himself BTK, bind, torture, kill, and sent taunting letters to the press and police. What made him more terrifying was his double life: a church president, a father, a city employee. He kept his monstrous side locked away like a secret diary. For decades, no one suspected the man sitting beside them at Sunday service was a sadistic killer. Among the most infamous was Ted Bundy, whose face could have graced a magazine cover. Charming, educated, and manipulative, Bundy lured women by pretending to be injured or impersonating authority figures. Then he attacked, bludgeoning, strangling, and sexually assaulting his victims. He often returned to the bodies, seeking continued dominance. Bundy confessed to 30 murders, but the real number is likely much higher. He didn't just want to kill, he wanted to control, to own, to obliterate. On the other side of the world, in the cold expanse of Soviet Russia, a different horror was unfolding. Andrei Chikatilo, the butcher of Rostov, murdered, mutilated, and sometimes cannibalized more than 50 women and children. His crimes were sexually driven, fueled by rage and impotence. He would stab his victims dozens of times, sometimes biting off body parts, sometimes eating them. In a society where law enforcement was fractured and inefficient, Chikatilo thrived in the chaos, becoming Russia's most notorious serial killer. In America, a woman took the title of serial killer, shattering another boundary. Aileen Wuornos, a former sex worker, shot and killed 7 men across Florida. She claimed self-defense, that they tried to rape her. But her mental decline, violent outbursts, and cold resolve painted a complex portrait. Raised in poverty, abused from childhood, and living on the streets, Wuornos became both predator and victim. Her story became a debate. Was she a monster, or a woman shaped by monstrous circumstances? And finally, there's Pedro Rodrigues Filho, Brazil's answer to Dexter. By the age of 14, he had already killed. His targets? Criminals, gang members, even his own father, who he stabbed 22 times in prison after his father murdered his mother. Filho claimed to have killed over 70 people, many of them behind bars. He didn't hide. He believed he was cleansing the world of evil. But his sense of justice was raw, violent, and without mercy. These 10 figures, separated by oceans, languages, and eras, share a singular obsession: death. They didn't just kill. They studied it, perfected it, found identity in it. Their lives form a tapestry of terror, each thread soaked in suffering, each story a reminder of how close evil can live to the surface of civility. They were not supernatural. They were not creatures of myth. They were human beings. And perhaps that's what makes their stories the most terrifying of all. If you didn't know their crimes, you could mistake these killers for coworkers, neighbors, or even leaders in your community. Their evil is not loud and obvious. It's quiet, calculated, and deeply human. It's as if they were cast from the same mold. Different countries, different backgrounds. But their psychological blueprints are hauntingly similar. They lived dual lives. Rader was a church leader. Shipman a doctor. Bundy a law student. Outwardly they were stable. Inwardly they were filled with bloodlust. This duplicity is not coincidence. It's how they operated, hiding their crimes behind facades of normalcy. They preyed on the forgotten. Children. Sex workers. The elderly. Addicts. Runaways. They didn't pick victims with loud voices or powerful families. They chose the silent, the invisible, the ones society often overlooks. It wasn't random. It was predatory calculation. They were shaped by trauma. Many had violent, abusive childhoods. Garavito was molested, López raped, Wernos abandoned and beaten. That doesn't excuse them, but it points to the crucible that forges killers. Their trauma fermented, twisted into something unrecognizable. They thrived on control. Whether through strangulation, binding, manipulation, or mutilation, they needed to dominate. Power wasn't the byproduct of murder, it was the purpose. That unquenchable thirst links them like blood brothers. They refined their art. These weren't frenzied killers. They studied, learned, evolved. Ridgway dumped bodies near water. Little remembered facial features decades later. Chikatilo knew when to strike. Routines became rituals. Death was their craft. It's terrifying to realize how many of these killers could walk into a room and be the most unassuming person there. They didn't wear evil on their sleeves. They kept it in their eyes, behind locked doors, in glove compartments, and beneath floorboards. So what do we learn when we lay their stories side by side? We learn that serial killers are rarely the monsters hiding in the dark. They are monsters hiding in plain sight. Each one of these individuals committed crimes of staggering cruelty. But what makes them unforgettable is the eerie consistency in their behavior. Their victims changed. Their countries differed. Their weapons varied. But the blueprint remained the same: a craving for control, a mask of normalcy, a pattern of predation. Their stories force us to confront hard truths. That trauma can metastasize into horror. That society often fails to protect its most vulnerable. That evil is not always visible until it's too late. We also learn that our blind spots, our assumptions about safety, trust, and danger, are what many of these killers exploit. They study us. They blend in. And they bide their time. The most terrifying monsters aren't just the ones who act on impulse. They're the ones who plan, who rehearse, who treat murder like a meticulous performance. By understanding their methods and their minds, we don't glorify them. We strip away their invisibility. We see them for who they are: deeply broken people who turn their pain into violence, their fantasies into rituals. The 10 killers I've profiled didn't come from the same parents. But they share the same psychological DNA. A capacity for cruelty, an appetite for power, and an ability to blend in. In the end, they show us not just what evil looks like, but how frighteningly human it can be.
Like and subscribe.